Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeremy Harrell, and I'm the Chief Executive Officer of ClearPath. And at ClearPath, we see permit reform as our top priority in 2026. It's an immense opportunity for Congress to come together to modernize our grid, to ensure affordable energy in this moment of rising demand, to further American innovation, AI leadership, and manufacturing competitiveness, and to reduce emissions. And in my roughly 20 years in Washington, D.C., I don't think we've ever seen more agreement on both sides of the aisle that our system's broken and we need a more predictable system. And I'm very pleased here today to be joined by two of the most outspoken leaders on permit reform in the U.S. House of Representatives, Energy and Commerce members, Republican Gabe Evans from Colorado and Scott Peters from California. And we're going to dive right into this conversation because I know we've got a limited amount of time. And beyond your guys' roles at Energy and Commerce, you are the co-chairs of the Problem Solvers Caucus, a working group that is oriented around energy, environment, and permit reform. Can you guys tell us a little bit how that framework, which kind of previews where a deal could be, syncs up with some of the legislation we've been hearing about today and where we think a deal could go? And Congressman Evans, you want to start with us?
Sure, Jeremy, thanks so much. Scott, always good to do these events with you. And you mentioned the Problem Solvers Permitting Reform Package, which really speaks to a lot of different areas where we need this reform around transmission, around clean air, clean water, and recognizing that we have to protect our environment, but we also have to be able to build stuff here. And as I'm sure we'll get into it, we have to have informed decisions, but we can't paralyze the process, because if we're paralyzing the process through all of this regulatory burden, we're never going to be able to build things, and we're going to cede our global dominance to places around the world like China that not only do things with horrible human rights abuses, but they do things with a much higher carbon footprint and higher emissions than we do. And so that permitting reform framework, we released it as a framework because in the House there's 3 committees of jurisdiction in a lot of this permitting reform. In the Senate, you've got 2 more committees. So by releasing it as a framework, it gives the flexibility for lots of individual pieces of legislation across multiple committees and gives deference to those chairmen as we work this process across multiple committees and multiple different bills.
Congressman Peters, you've been trying to build the tent here around this and some more.
I've been working at this since I looked like that guy. So it's been a while. I was an environmental lawyer for 15 years before I went into public service, and it always struck me that there was a lot of process to get to an environmental result that could have been minimized and still got to the same result. And when I came here, I started getting involved on energy and commerce in these issues. And I think it really crystallized for me when I was very proud to be a Democrat who voted for the infrastructure bill, which was bipartisan, mostly Democrats, but also for the IRA, the biggest down payment in the history of the world on climate change, climate action. I was very proud of that, but I was just as embarrassed as a Democrat that how little we did. The best example was, I think, when we were called in front of the Energy and Commerce Committee by the Republicans, who appropriately wanted to point out that after we had set aside $43 billion for closing the digital divide and building rural broadband, but also connecting underserved urban areas, 3 years later, we hadn't built a single line, not one. So they had a hearing on it. And the Democratic witness very cheerfully explained that 20 states were just about through the 14-step process that we set out to get that done. And she wasn't embarrassed, but I was embarrassed. What I also saw was, if you looked at the work of Jesse Jenkins at Princeton, that we knew that unless we really built this stuff fast, we were going to lose a lot of the benefits of the environmental climate benefits of the IRA, particularly the grid. And so I really started paying attention to that, and that's how we got into this. The problem solvers, I think they want to solve problems. It's been a good group. Gabe's been a good partner. And I think we're really as far along on a pretty comprehensive deal around energy as we've been. And I'd be happy to tell you where I think the 5 components of that are. But it's something that's very close to us. It's got to be done really in the next 3 months for it to get done. And I think the stars are aligned if we're smart enough to do it.
Let's get into some of those specifics, and there's an issue that you have jointly been leading on is on this permit certainty topic, and we've heard a lot about it already today. We need a predictable system, not just for 2026, but for the decades to come, to really seize the opportunity. And you guys have put forth this discussion draft, the Certain Act. Could you talk a little bit about some of the details on it and how you see it being an essential piece of the puzzle?
I think everyone across the energy industry is concerned about the way the Trump administration is treating some forms of energy. We've been told by the Republicans that the oil and gas people felt that way about Biden. I don't think it's anything like this, but it does provide a reason for us to come together and deal with certainty. The Certain Act would provide not just at the back end that you can't pull the permit from things that have been legally permitted, often under construction, sometimes in operation, which we've seen, but also that you have to move the process along. Right now, the Secretary of the Interior, Doug Burgum, is assigned with signing off on each of the 69 steps that it takes to put up a wind facility, which is clearly a way to kill it. I mean, even the notion I could go out and survey a site, Doug Burgum is supposed to sign off on that permit, and that's just not going to work. So I think I heard Fred Krupp on the way out saying, we've got to stop that. I think there's huge interest. The Certain Act that Gabe and I put out has got Republicans and Democrats on it in the House. We're trying to get I think we're close to getting a companion introduced in the Senate, and would deal with this problem as part of a larger effort to deal with permitting certainty, permit reforming.
Yeah, and we know that these big infrastructure projects often take years to get done. There's tens to hundreds of billions of dollars that are invested in these. And so we have to have certainty that spans across multiple administrations. I represent, my district is truly all of the above. I have a massive oil and gas presence, but 1 and 2 wind generators in the country are made in my district. I have some of the biggest solar projects in the country in my district, geothermal. We don't have nuclear anymore. We've got the spent fuel rods back when we did have nuclear generation. We've got one of the last all U.S. sourced battery manufacturers in my district. And so making sure that we have that certainty for energy projects across different administrations is critical, again, because I saw the impact of that for my oil and gas folks. My church in the heart of oil and gas country went from 150 folks down to 50 folks under the previous administration. And so making sure that that doesn't happen to energy projects, as long as they're safe, affordable, and reliable, and we have that ability to be able to invest the amount of money and time and effort into these infrastructure projects that are going to take years to build out, we just have to have that certainty. And so that's a huge component of why Scott and I are working together to make sure that we get this across the finish line.
Hey, Jerry, if I could add, we've got support for this framework from across the industry, from INGA, the oil and gas folks, API, American Petroleum Institute, all the clean energy producers, labor, who is just as tired of getting pulled off of Revolution Wind as they were getting pulled off the Keystone Pipeline, and environmental groups. So we invite your attention to it. We hope you'll talk to your senators and representatives about getting on it. It's foundational. And just one other thing, we talked about Revolution Wind getting pulled. I had a European investor come into my office, not the one who was running that one, but a comparable one, and a comparable investor. And they said that they view investing in American energy right now as if you're investing in Vietnam or Brazil. So think of what you lose from that kind of expectation, loss of confidence in the rule of law and regularity here in the United States. So certainty is something I think we should get behind, and hope you'll support us.
Yeah, I mean, predictability is the name of the game if we're going to be competitive, and I think you're seeing Republicans and Democrats on both the Senate and the House really underscoring that and wanting to take the politics out. I want to shift a little bit to the grid, because I think that's a really important piece of this puzzle as well, and start with you, Congressman Evans. You're a heavy energy producing district and state, as you mentioned, and you've been really a leader on energy and commerce, talking about grid modernization, on trying to fix interconnection related issues, and talk about transmission. What are you seeing on the ground, and what makes you convinced that the system is broken and we need to try something different?
Yeah, well, we know the system is broken, and we've seen it personally up close in my district. I'll give you a couple of examples. We've had 2 public safety power shutoffs. also known as the wind blew a little bit too hard, so we had to turn the grid off. Hundreds of thousands of folks without power, jobs and businesses losing thousands of dollars in revenue, every hour that the grid is off, because it's not reliable. It hasn't been hardened to the point to where it can withstand a simple wind event. And so being able to invest in modernizing the grid, hardening the grid, making sure that we're deploying modern technology on the grid so we can do something as simple as keep the lights on when the wind is blowing is critical for the whole country. But again, specifically for my district, where in the last 2 months we've had multiple different times where the grid has literally been turned off. So that's a crucial thing that we're seeing boots on the ground. Another challenge is we know that we just don't have the transmission. We mentioned AI a little bit earlier. I tell folks we have to be the global leader in AI because if we're not, that doesn't mean it goes away. It just means that the Chinese Communist Party becomes the global leader in AI. And so if you're nervous about AI, you need to be terrified of communist AI. We have to have the power on the grid. We have to have the interconnections. We have to have the transmission so that we can build and fuel these data centers. We have a data center going in near the northern end of my district. They actually do have the power. They just can't get it to their proposed site because they don't have the transmission. So making sure that we have that ability to transmit things and that we have the ability to actually build out the transmission in a way that's beneficial, not just for the big picture country as a whole, but that's also receptive to state and local communities' needs as well. And so by reducing a bunch of the excessive and duplicative regulations around how we manage and build more transmission at the federal level, that frees up these big projects to do a better job of interfacing with state and locals so that we don't have a situation like what's happening in eastern Colorado right now. We got a big Power Pathways project that's going in that's contemplating the use of a lot of eminent domain. And of course, that is making everybody in eastern Colorado just lose their minds. They're up in arms. So if we can alleviate those demands at the federal level and folks can spend more time working with state and local partners to be able to get these things done in a mutually beneficial way, that's also going to be critical to solving the transmission problems that we're facing.
I mean, this rising demand moment has just radically changed the paradigm. We need to build more of everything, and grid infrastructure and transmission is going to be an essential piece of that. Congressman Peters, you've been beating this drum for a while and put out bipartisan legislative proposals on it.
The grid is old and small and dumb and vulnerable, and we all know we have to beef it up.
Tell us how you really feel.
Well, I'm just saying. I don't think we hurt its feelings. It's inanimate, but we don't have to start from scratch here because there's really good work in the can already from EPRA. Manchin Barrasso dealt with a lot of these issues. There's still some skepticism among Republicans on the Energy and Commerce Committee about the fairness of cost allocation. But look, folks, that's done within regions all the time, according to economic factors. We could take out all the politics, all the climate, all the woke, just assign costs. We could do that interregionally. It's not that hard, and a lot of the work's already been done. So that's part of our 5-part deal.
We heard a lot from Congressman Westerman earlier about the kind of limits of jurisdiction in the House and with the SPEED Act moving forward at the end of the year and the Permit Act on the Clean Water Act and pipeline side. You guys don't have those limitations at the Problem Solvers Caucus, and so I think it's why it's really interesting the framework kind of lays out these big buckets. Congressman Peters, you alluded to this a little bit earlier too. What do you see as these key pieces that could come together and be the bipartisan deal that we know our country needs?
So you need certainty. You need the transmission piece. You need the SPEED Act. I actually really have a lot of respect for Bruce Westerman. We worked together on some the Fix Our Forest Act and the Sequoias bill. He's extremely good legislator. He happens to be a Yale-educated forester, so he knows more about forestry than anybody in Congress. And he did really good work on the SPEED Act. He had put about half the Certain Act into the SPEED Act to get some Democratic votes, and the Freedom Caucus pulled it out really literally on the floor. He got 11 Democratic votes. I think he would have had upwards of 30 if that had not happened. And I got 30 people on a letter, 30 Democrats saying, Bruce, here's what we need to do to get more Democrats on there. So there's a lot of people in play. But that's a really good reform, and I think the NEPA is a big part of it. And then there's two other, just if I might, part of the framework, two other oil and gas things that I think are important. One is, this is important to Senator Capito, is relief from Section 401 of the Clean Water Act, which is what allows a governor to stop a pipeline from going underneath his or her state for, reasons that some would call BS. But I'm a Democrat, so I support them. But the other side of that is we need to deal with methane regulation. So if you want more natural gas, I think we said to the industry, we need you to control methane, and we're very close to doing that. Biden put in rules. Obama put in rules. Trump repealed them. Biden put in rules. Trump's going to repeal them again. The industry's going crazy. They actually said leave the rules in place so we know how to plan. But my challenge to the industry is write those rules now. Give something that EDF can support, but give us something that's enforceable. But give your little people, little operators extra time. Give them financial support. Set something up now so that we can be confident that fugitive emissions will be limited. That takes a lot of the steam out of the political argument that natural gas is dirty. By the way, all the innovation has been driven by customer demand from Europe, from Japan and Korea that want clean gas. We've shown we can produce it. Just put it in the law, and then I think you've got a deal that we could do in the next 3 months, and the time is now.
Congressman Evans, and you've been leading on things alongside Congressman Peters on e-permittings, trying to modernize the systems. There's been a wave of Republican-led suspension bills that have gotten immense bipartisan support focused on critical minerals, mining. So as you all are talking to the group of Republican and Democratic members that you're trying to build this big coalition on, what are some of the things that you think are an essential piece of this deal beyond the SPEED Act and the Permit Act that the House acted on in December?
Yeah, so you've mentioned speed, you've mentioned the Certain Act, e-permit. Really, it's a couple of different things. We know these things have to be bipartisan because bipartisan is always going to be more durable. Like Scott was saying, when one side's in power, they're not going to try to tear everything down, and then the other side gets in power and they try to rip it all up again, and you've got industry and infrastructure projects stuck in the middle. For my district and for a lot of other districts around the country, one of the final things that we really haven't talked a whole lot about is the Clean Air Act. And ozone attainment and non-attainment areas. And so a problem that we're rapidly discovering and that has bipartisan impetus to fix is that the Clean Air Act sets certain caps for ground level pollutants like ozone, but it doesn't give any perspective to the source of those emissions. And so you have situations where you got wildfires raging in northern Canada, and that smoke plume is coming down to the United States, and where I live, Rocky Mountains, getting trapped up against the Rocky Mountains. Our air quality will go down, but it's American jobs, American manufacturing, American projects that are being crushed under the weight of poor air quality. But we have no control over that. If it's wildfire smoke from Canada, interstate transport of pollutants and emissions, you actually have a perverse incentive for places like China to pollute more, because if that pollution, and we know the numbers, it's low double-digit percentages in my part of the country, as that pollution comes to the United States, and pushes us over that cap, it's American jobs and American projects that have to ramp down, which again gives them that perverse incentive to pollute more. So another package of bills is moving through the Energy and Commerce Committee. I'm happy to be on a bipartisan piece of legislation called the Fire Act, which says you can't hold American jobs accountable to smoke from across international borders, and you shouldn't count any of emissions from good wildfire management practices, things like clearing out fuel loads, dead logs, dead trees, things like that, or doing controlled burns. Those things also should not penalize American jobs and American manufacturing.
Well, I've got one last question for both of you, and I think it's the question that everyone is getting asked here today. And it's a simple question. Can we get a bipartisan permitting deal done in 2026? Congressman Evans, you want to start?
Yeah, so I just mentioned my Fire Act. There's not a lot that Gavin Newsom and Greg Abbott agree on. But they're both members of the Western Governors Association, and Western Governors has endorsed the Fire Act because we know we need this common sense permitting reform. So when we've got Gavin Newsom, Greg Abbott agreeing on things, I absolutely think that we can get something done in this space.
Congressman Peters, can we get it done?
I think the stars are aligned, and like I said, I don't think the academics are complicated. I think the politics are more complicated. There is some ego involved in this. To be completely honest, I think the behavior of the Trump administration on wind and solar has been really very difficult for folks. But we're not talking about something to solve a problem for the next 3 years. We're really talking about something for the next 3 decades, and I hope people will have that perspective. And if they do, and we get to work now, I do believe we have the possibility for a transformative deal, and that's why I get on the plane from 75 degrees San Diego and come out to see you fine people.
The last 2 weeks, that has to be particularly hard, but couldn't agree more. It's about getting a bipartisan, politically durable deal that gives us the permitting system we need for the next decades, not for just this year. So thank you both for your strong leadership on these issues.
Thanks to the Bipartisan Policy Center for putting this on as well.
Yeah, likewise.